from your favorite source for Chicago White Sox talk, delivering news, interviews, analysis, and more. This is the Sox Machine podcast with your hosts, Jim Margulis and Josh Nelson.
Thanks, Rob, and welcome to the Sox Machine podcast. I'm your host, Josh Nelson, as it's Monday, June 5th, 2023, as we bring you a new episode. It's funny how things have worked out for the White Sox against their American League Central rivals. They lose 3 out of 4 against the Royals in Kansas City, and then turn around the next week to sweep the Royals in Chicago. They lose 3 out of 4 against the Tigers in Detroit. A week later, they turn around and sweep the Tigers in Chicago. We'll recap the White Sox sweep that featured some memorable walk-off wins that were cool and weird. With the NCAA Regionals postseason this weekend, it has inspired a crazy idea that I have for the Major League Baseball playoffs, and we'll preview the White Sox next series as they head to the Bronx. Joining me is the managing editor of SoxMachine.com. It's Jim Margulis, and Jim, the White Sox are 3-0 in the month of June. The winning vibes are going to continue, right?
Let's enjoy it while they last. The Tigers are bad. Without Riley Green, without Eduardo Rodriguez in the mix, even with Michael Lorenzen being unhittable for the White Sox lineup, that is a bad lineup. So, tip your cap to the White Sox for throwing strikes this time and realizing there's really nothing to fear here. Michael Kopech got burned by spinning a slider to Spencer Torkelson. And that explains why Torkelson was pitched around by Clevenger the game before. Pretty much he might be the one hitter can hurt you. And he's not that scary in and of himself. He just can't really make a mistake like Kopech did. But they recovered from that mistake. It wasn't pretty. It took a while, but they did bounce back from it. So, the White Sox made it look simple. And they probably realize now that, this could have been so much easier in Detroit had we actually been able to find the strike zone.
Yeah. And I know we've been talking about this ever since the balanced schedule conversation that we had with Matt Snyder of CBS Sports. Man, the White Sox need those extra divisional games this season. I don't know about future seasons. And again, I like the balanced schedule as a fan, but the White Sox really need those extra division games this season because I think it'd be their best chance at climbing out of this hole, at least get out of being below 500 and try to catch up to everybody in the American League Central. Because as we're recording this on June 5th, the White Sox are just 5.5 games back of the Minnesota Twins in the division, as the Twins lost 2 out of 3 against the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians now have Tristan McKenzie, who was outstanding on Sunday for the Guardians. So that could possibly change the momentum in the division again, as we saw last year. So something to keep an eye on if Cleveland starts to pitch a lot better. But for the White Sox pitching against this Detroit lineup, and to your point, Jim, not a very scary Tigers lineup, the starters did an excellent job. Kopech, 7 innings, 3 hits allowed, 2 earned runs, which were on that home run that Jim mentioned. 9 strikeouts to 1 walk. That's 4 straight starts, by the way, for Michael Kopech with 9 strikeouts. He just needs 4 more of them to catch up to Chris Sale, who set the club record with 8 straight starts with 9+ strikeouts. Dylan Cease, yes, he does not go deep into games, but he went 5 1/3 innings, allowed just 2 hits, 1 earned run, which was off a wild pitch. 3 walks and 6 strikeouts. Clevenger came back, and he looked sharp off the injured list with 5 scoreless innings, just allowed 3 hits, 6 strikeouts, 1 walk. So the starters for the White Sox went more than 17 innings. They only allowed 8 hits to the Tigers, walked them only 5 times this time, allowed 3 earned runs, and had 21 strikeouts. The White Sox bullpen, Jim, 10 2/3 scoreless innings. And it seems like this bullpen unit has found a rhythm, and maybe Grifol himself, along with Ethan Katz, finally have their bullpen strategy down, and it helps a great deal when these guys are not allowing the amount of walks and home runs that we saw from them in April.
Kendall Graveman looks like he's the closer that Grifol was really reluctant to name, which is fine. I didn't mind Graveman being named the closer out of the gate just because in his experience closing here and there, he's been a league average closer. Like games that he's expected to close entering the ninth inning, there are blown saves for setup guys. If they lose the lead in the seventh inning or eighth inning of a game, they're never going to pitch the ninth, and they still get the blown save nevertheless. So raw blown save totals can be misleading for guys who aren't accustomed to closing. But in games that Graveman was expected to finish, he was basically like 83%, 5 for 6, which is the average closer rate. So I didn't mind him being named there, but he also looked rocky in the early going. So he didn't necessarily lend a lot of confidence to Grifol and to Ethan Katz the way he pitched early, but he seems to found his mix with getting fewer ground balls, but using higher fastballs more effectively to avoid terrible contact. Like he was, trying to pitch lower in the zone, but not getting the same amount of sink, and they were lifting the ball and he was getting burned a little bit. So he's learned to pitch around not having the ground balls he's used to. Joe Kelly is healthy. Keenan Middleton has been a revelation and has remained one. I think he's like an Evan Marshall who throws harder. 3 pitches, can throw any of them at any single time, 4 strikes or useful misses. And then Lopez has been able to bounce back without having to be in high leverage every single time, which I think is the forgiveness that somebody of his talent level deserves. Like somebody who doesn't have the wipeout slider probably can't pitch high leverage against the other team's best hitters every single game. So he's finding more appropriate situations. They're still a little weak on the left side, but otherwise they have the rough order ironed out. And now you have Liam Hendricks coming back, throwing a little bit harder, using his slider more effectively, seems to have gotten past the initial jitters of his first outing and is turning into somebody who's not quite his old form, using the slider a little bit more, but the slider looks like an okay pitch to where he can handle that occasional high leverage situation until he proves that he's fully back, and maybe he shares some, in this case, he pitched in the ninth inning. So, he might share some of those closer duties with Kendall Graveman, but there's still some flexibility baked into Grifol's plan, but now he has multiple pitchers who are helping him execute that plan. I think the only weakness, and the Tigers really didn't explore this whatsoever, is the left side. Aaron Bummer, Garrett Crochet still weak. If you have a lineup full of lefties, maybe you have Joe Kelly going out there with this changeup. That's probably the best weapon you have against lefty, but not maybe the traditional comfortable way to go. I think Grifol still has to figure that out. But otherwise, on the right side, this is a really good unit, and the unit that Rick Hahn probably thought he was paying for.
Yeah, with Hendricks, he's inching closer to what his fastball velocity average has been the last couple of years, where he is averaging in the mid 97 mile per hour, so 97.5 mile per hour the last 2 years. In his appearance on Sunday, he hit 96.8 miles per hour in Baseball Savant, and that was for a strike 3 looking. So it's inching closer. So we saw 93 in Charlotte, 95 in Charlotte. Since he's been in Chicago, he's averaging 96. So he's getting closer. So he is getting stronger. That is a good sign. Our fear was him coming in throwing 93, 94 wasn't going to cut it, but that really hasn't been the case for Liam Hendricks, and he pitched on back-to-back days. So a really good sign as far as his development. I do agree with you, Jim. On the left-hand side, it'd make life a lot easier if you could actually trust Aaron Bummer, Garrett Crochet to get lefties out. But with their performance, I think that's impacting some of the strategy there. But when you hold the opposing team at 3 games to just 3 runs, you should sweep. Mm-hmm. That's just how I feel. You should sweep those 3 games. So outstanding job by the White Sox pitching staff. Let's talk about the walk-off wins that we saw on Sunday and on Saturday. We'll start with Sunday because that's the cool walk-off win. Jake Berger, walk-off grand slam. The first walk-off grand slam for the White Sox since Jose Abreu back in his rookie season that almost killed Hawk Harrelson on the call against the Tampa Bay Rays. That was Grant Belfour.
Yeah.
That was the closer for the Rays. And the White Sox in that inning, Jim, figured out Alex Lane wasn't throwing many pitches in the strike zone. It took 3 games against Alex Lane to finally figure it out, but they did figure it out as Andrew Benintendi had a pitch hit single against Lane. Makata walked. That was a pitch hit walk. Tim Anderson walked. And then Jake Berger got a curveball that was in the zone that he was able to drive over the left field wall for his grand slam, his 12th home run of the season. That's the cool walk-off win, Jim.
Oh, well, I disagree just because I like the weird stuff. But
we'll get to the weird walk-off win in a moment. But for Sunday, this was a good sign that I wish they would learn a lot quicker. But hey, they did. They finally figured out Alex Lang.
Yeah, well, at first I have fond memories of that Grant Balfour walk-off because I remember like him storming off the mound and going back to the dugout, and they showed him slamming his glove in the dugout and cursing something, but it sounded like spring break. Like for whatever reason, just like I watched it over and over again, and that's what I heard. And every time I saw him, I just thought of him yelling spring break in the dugout after giving a walkout grand slam. It was probably, given Liam Hendricks' mouth, probably some kind of curse in an accent that I couldn't quite pick up, not knowing exactly what his vowel sounded like at the time. But that's, I always think spring break when it comes to Grant Balfour. Now, when it comes to like the Alex Lang thing, that's probably the most, when it comes to the White Sox plate discipline or lack thereof, I think like Alex Lang laid it bare more than anybody, just with the amount of swings and misses he was getting on pitches like at the ankles or lower. Like the way he throws sinker, curveball, anything that starts like knee high or thigh high, probably going to be a ball. And it's almost a little bit like hitting a knuckleballer. If it's high, let it fly. If it's low, let it go. Kind of the same thing with Lang, because he doesn't throw a lot that remains on the same plane. It's either sinking one way or diving. And just, his first appearance, both Andrew Vaughn and Yasmani Grandal, terrible at bats. Jake Berger had the most respectable plate appearance, but even then, like, he didn't swing at a strike. Like, maybe it might have been a borderline strike, but it wasn't. He was helping the pitcher out. He swung at a pitcher's pitch. Second plate appearance, or second time they faced Lang, they took, I think, like the first curve out of the zone. I was thinking like, okay, they figured it out. And then like the rest of the plate appearance is terrible. They just had the, immediately, like, it's kind of like, remind me of like dog training. Like you can do it once and then like you increase the distance and like, nope, they won't sit and stay. They come after you. They won't wait for that treat.
Right.
And then you just have to reset the clock and do it all over again. That's what that reminded me of. Just terrible plate appearances after like one display of showing the ability to lay off one pitch. This time around better. I also think Lang was off his game, like second game in a row. Andrew Benintendi, credit to him, I think, setting the tone with like a responsible plate appearance. I think this is what like Benintendi has offered so far is, no homers, obviously. That's disappointing for a corner outfield, but like his strength, I think what he's offering is just a guy who always looks like he knows what he wants to do at the plate. Doesn't always execute it. His ability to damage pitches that he really wants to take a good hack at is limiting his ceiling. But when you look at some of these other swings that, these White Sox hitters are trying to get off up and down the lineup, like Benintendi looks like the only one who just has an idea of what the pitcher is going to do to him and how he can possibly combat that at times. So, having him lead off an inning, I like having that. I don't like just necessarily having him up like with nobody on and 2 outs when he could really use a homer or an extra base hit to, get that instant offense. But at the top of the order in an inning, great. And sure enough, gets a single to center field, gets the line moving. And then, as the pitches start to pile up, his misses were getting worse and worse until finally he hangs a curveball to Berger, and Berger looks like he's waiting for it, stays back long enough to put the barrel on it. And because he's so strong, it was an incomplete swing. It was a swing where he was protecting against the fastball, but also knew the curveball was ready, kept his hands back, and his hands were strong enough just to get that ball over the fence.
Yeah, and it was a cool moment to be in the stadium, to see the fly ball. You knew it was deep enough that it was going to end the game, but for it to carry over the wall and to be a walk-off grand slam again, that's the first one in more than 9 years for the Chicago White Sox. That's Jose Abreu who did it in 2014. Let's talk about the weird walk-off, and I don't know if we're ever going to see this type of game again. I did wear, so I mocked up a t-shirt, and maybe I'll just put it in the Sox Machine store if you guys are really interested, if you want it. That's I Heart Wild Pitch Offense. If you guys have been listening to this podcast, have been following us on Twitter for years, Jim and I are big fans of the Wild Pitch Offense because sometimes that's the only type of offense the White Sox have, especially when they're struggling. On Saturday, White Sox win 2-1. All 3 runs score off at a wild pitch, and the White Sox walk it off because I think someone on Twitter referenced that the homer at bat where Homer gets plunked in the face and they win the game. Mm-hmm. The home umpire, I don't know what happened with the Tigers catcher, got mixed up, took a 96-mile-per-hour fastball to the face, and that's how the White Sox win as the umpire gets knocked out and the ball carries away and Moncada scores, and the home plate umpire, according to Scott Merkin on Twitter, was still being evaluated in Chicago. So hopefully they will be fine soon. But what a weird game, Jim, on Saturday. I don't know if we'll ever see that again, where 3 runs are scored, the winning team wins 2-1, all runs scored were off wild pitches, and the way that last wild pitch happened, I don't know if we'll ever see that type of game again.
Yeah, it's like, why don't they make the whole plane out of wild pitch offense? And it was such a, it was strange, one, just to see an umpire take a direct shot like that. Because even over the course of so many pitches over an entire season, you normally maybe once a year see an umpire take a direct shot like that. Sometimes you see, catchers whiff or get crossed up and an umpire gets clipped on the shoulder or, gets direct hit in the knee or something like that, but directly between the eyes on the mask. Like I said, maybe once a year that happens. And to have that strange moment, that aberration of a moment happen in a way that settles game is, I'm trying to do the quick math on it. I can't, but it's basically how many pitches in the season. And then, basically it's winning the lottery if you're a fan of wild pitch offense. Also just a strange confluence of moods because you had Eric Haas, whiffs on the pitch, immediately goes to locate the ball. When he locates the ball and realizes oh, that's not going to get there in time, his attention turns towards Corey Blazer because, one thing I like about baseball is the relationship catchers and umpires have over the course of the game, how they look out for each other and the uneasy alliance and, the unspoken ways they give each other time to recover from a direct shot. And so I always think there's a general sense of concern over the well-being of each. And so Haas, he turned around, said this is game's over, and immediately turns towards Corey Blazer, see if he's okay. Yohan Moncada's steaming home, but they can't have the mob at home plate because Corey Blazer is lying there in a heap. And, it almost reminded me a little bit of the benches clearing over O'Neal Cruz in Pittsburgh, to where all of a sudden all of the activity was around home plate and O'Neal Cruz is on the ground and just this looks inappropriate to have, a guy on the ground and almost getting trampled. And so it kind of brought that to mind of just all these bodies converging on home plate and one person who's clearly not well. And, how do you balance tending to that person while also, experiencing the emotions of whatever's happening at that given time? And so you had this muted celebration of home plate because nobody wants to be the still photo I used at the game recap is Moncada coming with a smile as the umpire just crumpled over and Eric Haas is, leaning over him, and even Tim Anderson is checking on him. It's a weird, it almost looks like Moncada celebrating, and he's not, he just scored the winning run. But that's, that was the other strange thing about it, is just when you have those conflicting emotions within 15, 20 feet of each other, you have concern over oh, somebody's brain got rattled. And then, oh, we just won this game in the most unlikely fashion. We stole a win. And I thought it was good that the White Sox did not celebrate the way they normally would. You didn't see a Gatorade bath that could possibly splash onto the umpire who's down on the ground. It seemed like they handled it appropriately, understanding Corey Blazer took a direct shot and even if he was calling a game that measured 60% on an ump scorecard, nobody would want to see that. And,
right.
It's at least good that it was last pitch and he could walk off the field and get tended to as the end of the game. They didn't have to split the attention among, how do we replace the umpiring crew, or how do we adjust it to, have a missing umpire? At least he was able to leave the field and be tended to without, the game being compromised and the umpires being distracted in any way.
So those are the two walk-off wins the White Sox had over the weekend. Let's talk about the concerning. And this is something we're going to be paying attention to as we preview the next series for the White Sox as they head to the Bronx. That's going to be later in the show when they face the New York Yankees. The White Sox offense only scores 11 runs in this series. And the majority of those runs. Swing. Yeah, 4 were on the last swing. Majority of those were against the Tigers bullpen, as the White Sox had difficulties against the Tigers starters, and that included one starter that was making their major league debut, and the other being Matthew Boyd, who has an ERA close to 6. And just running down the list as far as how the weekend went, like Tim Anderson, he had a good weekend getting on base. He was 5 for 12 with the walk, all singles. Luis Robert was 2 for 11. He had 7 strikeouts for the series. Jake Berger, his grand slam, was the only hit he had over the weekend. He was 1 for 6. Andrew Vaughn was 2 for 9, but with 2 walks. Yasmani Grandal was 1 for 10 with the walk. Andrew Benintendi was 4 for 9. And Eloy Jimenez was 3 for 12 with 2 RBIs, but he also struck out 4 times. There's not a lot going on with the White Sox offense, and there's also not a lot of pop going on for the White Sox offense when they face the Detroit Tigers this weekend. I say concerning, Jim, because they cannot hit like this when they go to New York. This White Sox offense, as we talked about in our last podcast episode, what do we learn from May? I said that this is a average pitching staff, and the pitching staff looked better than average this weekend. But this is a bottom 10 offense. This offense is still hitting as a bottom 10. They really could use a spark, and I'm hoping the Jake Berger grand slam gets him going. And I hope somebody else chips in with the extra base hits, because they really need a couple guys to get hot here if they're going to continue the winning vibes this month against far better competition in the next 22 games.
Yeah, I think we're seeing, the limitations of an offense that doesn't really draw walks. That's the hard part with the way the White Sox do business. Like Luis Robert, when he's not hitting, he's not doing anything because he doesn't walk, and he gets by on the quality of his swings. Tim Anderson largely gets by on the quality of his swings, although he did draw that walk in the 9th inning off Alex Lang to load the bases for Jake Berger. So, he's shown a little bit of improvement in the walk category, but it reminds me a little bit of like how older players tend to walk more because they necessarily, or they can't necessarily put the ball in play with the swing they want earlier in the at-bats, or they don't have the ability to do damage the way they did. So seeing the walk total rise while the homer total is at 0 makes me feel like less thrilled about the developments in the walk category for him. Yohan Moncada, not really a threat. Yasmani Grandal, not really a threat in terms of like showing the raw power that each has been known for in the past. So I think they're not drawing the walks that they're used to drawing. And it puts a lot of pressure on just the BABIP component of their attack, especially like when the ball is not leaving the yard. So that's, I think, what is exposed by this weekend is just when the hits are not dropping, when they're facing a starter, for instance, like Reese Olson, who will throw a right-on-right changeup and a decent one. White Sox hitters seem to be surprised by that. Whenever they're either it's like a sinker or a changeup, righties who can really run the ball in on righties tend to give them fits. And then, I think maybe the one, if I were to spin this positively, all the season we've been saying they can't hit the bullpen, so they better hit the starters. This time around, the bullpen came in and it was a relief because, okay, they can... Somebody else is on the mound now. Matthew Boyd is gone. Michael Lorenzen's gone. And now you can maybe stand a chance against a Will Vest or a Jason Foley. And given the way they'd been throwing this year, we expected that if precedent held, you'd see very few runs scored after the 6th inning. We saw with the Tigers, like they could not manage anything against the White Sox bullpen, but the White Sox were at least able to ruin that storyline by actually hitting the bullpen. So you can see like the benefits of both, like when it comes to just the White Sox ability to like put the ball in play, like Andrew Benintendi getting the ball rolling with getting the ball in play. Like the Luis Roberts at bat started improving towards the end of the series. Eloy Jimenez having better at bats since coming back. Like he and Robert were able to sequence some together and score some runs that way with some just, good opposite field hitting. Robert's legs being able to score, get to second on a double, score from second on a single, even though it didn't look like he expected maybe to be held up, and he eased it around third and then turned the Jets home, scored standing up. So you're able to see some of the athleticism pay off, but just the lack of walks. And when they're facing pitchers who don't do them favors by presenting easy walks, if they're not hitting for power naturally, and there are some dead spots when it comes to just the power in the lineup, then it tends to be, can you sequence 3 or 4 at-bats with singles and doubles without a double play getting in the way to ruin what they're building? It's really tough for any offense. And that's why, like, when you look at the White Sox, like, I think, well, you can't expect walks. So power is the only way out. And there are a few spots where they can get that power, but will they is the question.
Yeah, Andrew Vaughn leads the Chicago White Sox at on-base percentage at .335.
Yeah.
That's not very high for an on-base percentage to lead the team. Looking at just like OPS for White Sox hitters, Yasmani Grandal, Gavin Sheets, Eloy Jimenez, Jake Berger, Andrew Vaughn, and Luis Robert. They are the only hitters on this team with an OPS higher than 700 right now.
Yeah, the White Sox have a .297 team OBP.
Yeah.
Third
only
worst in
Robert.
baseball.
I can imagine. Yeah.
And the saving grace, and we mention this so often when talking about the 2023 White Sox, is every AL Central team is bottom 10. The Twins are 21st in OBP, Tigers 26th, Guardians 27th, White Sox 28th, Royals 30th. Worse than the A's.
Yeah. And Robert and Berger are the only ones with an OPS over 800 for the season. And to Jim's point, that's Sluggy's carried a lot of that load for the OPS for Luis Robert and Jake Berger, which is good. They need power. Luis Robert already has 70 strikeouts this season in 58 games, so he is going to probably strike out 200 times if he plays a complete season in 2023. He'll be up there, the strikeout total. They need someone else to help out here. And, offensively, we had the debate at last podcast episode with Roby Gonzalez and Elvis Andrews, and, who's going to be playing second base. And Roby got cold. And there's just not a lot going on offensively there. Clint Frazier is not providing a lot of offensive support against lefties. So a lot of the pressure here is going to be on the established guys. Like Tim Anderson, can we not have an OPS at 633? Like, it's great that you're hitting singles, but you got to get going here, man. Like, got to keep this going. Could use some more power here. He's only got 8 extra base hits. He's got 39 singles this year and 8 doubles. No home runs yet for Tim Anderson. His slash line is 273, 313, 320. It's slugging percentage at 320 is not good. Andrew Benintendi hitting 275, 330 on base percentage, slugging 355. Like, if that's your 1-2 hitters, the White Sox may have the weakest 1-2 hitter lineup in Major League Baseball. And in the next 22 games, I don't think this is going to cut it. So somebody needs to step up here, a little bit more consistency, or the White Sox pitching staff has to keep their opponents to scoring 3 runs or fewer in 3-game series, Jim, to keep the winning vibes going. Like, great sweep for the White Sox. And again, a lot of credit goes to the White Sox pitching staff for keeping Detroit to only scoring 3 runs. And there were some cool walk-off moments for the White Sox. The bullpen was fantastic. But if they want to keep the winning vibes going, the offense needs to be more productive.
Yeah, Yohan Moncada, 1 extra base hit in the last 14 games.
Yeah, he's cold.
Yasmani Grandal and Sebi Zavala not getting anything from the catchers. Like, Grandal has the homer, only extra base hit in 11 games. Sebi Zavala, only a single. He's 1 for 12. So you're looking at the catchers are combined 6 for 50. And with 1 extra base hit. And we kind of expected this from Grandal, just based on the season he had last year, being a catcher in his mid-30s with a lot of wear and tear. So many surgeries, back problems, leg problems. But like Sebi Zavala, I'm curious how long the White Sox can go carrying him. Just when it comes to his season, like 424 OPS, 153 average, 189 OBP, 2 homers this year. He's he's not on pace for the 10 I thought he might get to in our preseason predictions. So, he's been lagging, and just as Grandal fades a little bit, the catcher situation does stand a chance of like falling back to where it was last year. And that would be okay. Like if Moncada were hitting, if Andrews were providing the same offense that he provided late in the last season, but just with third base being rocky in the non-burger games, shortstop lack of power, no homers from Benintendi. They're just like a lot of dead spots in this offense, or a lot of, like Benintendi's playing fine, but as we mentioned, like Benintendi being such a weird candidate for a franchise's largest ever contract, is like, he can really only be expected to take care of himself, like produce enough to cover left field. He cannot provide that 5 to 6 win season that can mask deficiencies elsewhere. So when he's having like a slightly underwhelming season, he's providing the defense you thought you'd see. He's providing the on-base percentage you thought you'd see, but zero power whatsoever. So I would call it slightly disappointing on the whole. It's, it hurts more just because like that was your big addition and he's not quite carrying his own weight. And when your big addition doesn't even produce enough for himself, it just, puts the onus on everybody else to do more. And we're just seeing, the players we might have expected to do little. And then you have other guys who are just not keeping up as well.
Well, we're going to take a quick break for a word from our sponsors, but coming up next, it's for the Major League Baseball postseason format, thanks to college baseball. We'll talk about that next on the Sox Machine podcast. Man, there have been some big events going on in Chicago. Just had the Taylor Swift concert at Soldier Field. You got Drake coming into town. Ed Sheeran's coming into town. Got the NASCAR race going on in early July, on top of all the sporting events and other concerts, theater shows, and comedy shows as well. That's why I use Game Time to buy tickets for all of these types of events, because buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater shows near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. You don't have to worry about queues or waiting lines and wondering if Ticketmaster's ever going to refresh. Forget all about that. Use Game Time to buy your tickets to these events. Take advantage of the flash deals on last-minute tickets. It's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event. Plus, there's the Game Time guarantee. It means that you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use our promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase. Next weekend, the Marlins coming to town. You got tickets as low as $4. Do the math here. Use promo code Sox Machine for $20 off your first purchase on Game Time. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Sox Machine for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. So while the Chicago White Sox were sweeping the Detroit Tigers, this weekend also kicked off the NCAA regional round for college baseball. And man, chaos across the 16 regions. The 3rd seed, Arkansas, out. 4 seed, Clemson, had the nation's longest winning streak, out. Vanderbilt, the host, out. Miami, the host, out. Oklahoma State, the host, out. And just Auburn as well, another host, out. Out of the 16 guesses I made for the regional in the column that I had on SoxMachine.com, one player to follow from every school during the regional round. The best I could do is 8 out of 16, 50%. Just decimated in my college baseball bracket. But it makes for great theater. And it does create a lot of chaos when you're watching these regionals, because you have chances of these small schools to beat the giant programs and move on to the super regionals. But as I was looking at the double elimination format, I was thinking, Jim, this is not a bad idea to implement for Major League Baseball. And my thinking is, you got a 6-team playoff in each league. You could do a 6-team double elimination format for Major League Baseball to get to the World Series. 10 to 11 games fit into a 4 or 5 day span. And then that's who decides to go into the World Series. And then those two teams can face each other in a 7-game series. So what do you think about that idea?
Well, like in this situation, so how many teams get home games? Because when you have like host sites, that allows like various teams to keep playing each other in quick succession. So like, how do you envision the home games working?
So it'd be one site. So the benefit of having the best record of the regular season is that you would host this double elimination playoff. So all that revenue, all that money goes to the team that has the best record in Major League Baseball for the respective leagues. I'm sure other owners would complain about that, but they'll get a piece of the TV money. I don't know, maybe they get a piece of the gate money because it's their fans that are coming in for these types of games. But like the concessions and everything, there's expenses with that. So I would expect that the team that hosts this region or in this playoff format would keep the money. So Tampa Bay would host in the American League. I think in the National League, who is the best team in the National League right now? Is it Arizona?
I think it's been between the Dodgers and Diamondbacks.
Okay, so it's either going to be in Los Angeles or Phoenix for this particular format.
So you never want the White Sox to host a postseason game ever again.
Come on. They had the best record in 2005. They would have hosted in this format. But like determining like at a neutral site here, well, not neutral, but at a hosted site where everybody's playing the same stadium back to back to back to back. I think you just do a coin flip where whoever had the better record will be the home team if you go into the loser bracket.
Yeah, I like the idea of losers brackets just because it is a thing in curling as well. Like when you have a big event and you're guaranteed at least 3 games, you have the big bracket, but like if you lose your first game, you can still work your way, sometimes you can work your way back into the main event. Other times you can win your event. Like if you drop down to the B event, you can't get back into the A if you have like a huge field, but you can work your way, all the way to the B final. And that's something. Like you finish with like the second best record in the entire tournament. And that's something to be proud of as well. So there is some benefit to it. And, I like, given that I like regular season baseball and I seem to be losing that battle in terms of like, I like fewer postseason teams because I like the regular season to mean something. I like, given that only one team can win a World Series and only 2 teams can win their league championship. It's just like that's, and given that the White Sox so seldom do either, I'm kind of conditioned as a fan to be like, well, what's the point of, why did I just watch this entire season if they never stood a chance of winning? And, the whole thing. And just like, well, there are degrees of successes in a season, which I think Jerry Reinsdorf loves hearing. But as somebody who just, wants to enjoy baseball, I can take a lot of enjoyment out of like a well-played 86 win season. If they just didn't have the horses to win 95, but they played well and I was entertained as a baseball fan, like that's a good season. I liked watching that. It was a good companion to the summer, having those games unfolding. But since like that view is being more or less washed out by expanding postseason spots to the point where like, if you don't make the postseason, you did something wrong, especially with the way the White Sox, rebuilt and tore everything down to be a team that should win 90 games in a year. When you expand the postseason to where like, it does make it a failure if you don't get there, then you kind of have to give in to the postseason based outlook for a season and think like, okay, how can you make the postseason more enjoyable? And I do like the idea of losers brackets in terms of like, well, maybe you can work your way back into it. Your road got harder, but you can't necessarily be bounced out. You can just like take a punch to the face and shake it off and roar back with a vengeance. Kind of like in the NBA with the Miami Heat, having the play-in games and such and having to, come all the way, and then they upset Boston. All of a sudden, like, even if they get knocked out by the Nuggets, like their season was still awesome. The fact that they were able to do that much damage in the postseason, playing from where they were, and going into future seasons, future playoffs, like teams that go into that role can say like, well, the Heat did it. And so like they're a bit more engaged. So I do like the idea of like the longer road, and having that ability to like brush off a loss and just play really well and have that play rewarded. So I do like that, but I think, putting all your eggs into one team's postseason basket, I think is a non-starter.
Come on. They could pick other sites as well. Again, they're contemplating picking neutral sites for the NL ALCS or a neutral site World Series, which I know you hate.
Yeah. Fans make it special. Like, the Super Bowl is lame in that regard. Like, the Super Bowl is a TV event. Baseball is not going to be a TV event like that, where everybody gathers around to watch all the advertisements and watch, the single game and the single halftime show. Like, it's not that. Baseball is a local game. And when you have like the fan bases on display in the postseason, that's like the fun part. Like when the White Sox host a blackout game and Larry Garcia goes deep and the stadium shakes, and announcers who aren't used to that say like, wow, this is different. Like, that's the fun part of the game. Like Oakland, rest in peace to their postseason fan base, because it doesn't seem like we're going to be able to see the Coliseum fan base in October anymore. But like, that was always special, seeing that fan base. Seeing Seattle's come to life after their postseason drought was special. So yeah, that's why I think like, if you're going to go lean into the postseason approach for like what makes a season matter, then I think you really have to let those fan bases loose and really put them to the fore of just like, well, if the regular season no longer differentiates itself from the other sports when it comes to like baseball's value and baseball's, what makes baseball different from the other sports, then you're going to have to lean into like, well, this is the biggest possible stadium playing so many games. Like, football stadiums can host, 80,000 fans for one game or two games, but like you can have 11 games of just 50,000 fans going nuts, especially like if it's a starved fan base, like the White Sox and the Mariners or what have you. Like that's what's, that's what makes postseason baseball great to me, is having all that catharsis in the stands, just waiting to explode in a big moment. That's what makes it memorable.
Well, it could just be as intense in a double elimination format.
Yeah.
For visiting fans. But if you don't like it for the MLB postseason, how would you like this format to decide who gets the number one overall pick? Take the bottom 6 teams and have them play in a double elimination, and the team that wins this tournament gets the number one pick.
Yeah, I like it. Like it makes more sense to me. Like you get some bonus baseball. Almost like they should make them all day games or something like that. Like during the ALCS and NLCS, when the postseason, you don't want anything to detract from postseason baseball revenue, but like during the ALCS and NLCS, when all those games are primetime, just having like an 11 a.m. losers bracket game. Yes. Like, why not?
Yeah, you would have to do something for the players, though, because they're not going to really care. Like, what do they get out of it? Maybe there'll be some type of purse. Like, they're talking about having more mini tournaments, right? Because the World Baseball Classic was so much fun before the season. Maybe they could win money, the players themselves. So there'll be some type of purse that they can earn.
There's some TV revenue to be gained from it.
Yeah. No, I like this idea to decide the number one pick. I think this would just be insane if this is how the MLB playoffs worked. Like, watching how the regionals are going. If this is how you use the double elimination format to decide the teams going to the World Series, that would be so intense as far as those games. Like, you lose the 2 games, you're out. You're gone. Minnesota would be the 3rd seed right now, and they'd face Baltimore, who would be the 6th seed. Loser of that game would have to face the loser of the Yankees and Astros in that opening game. And that's a tough road.
It would be fun. Like, it would be fascinating. Like, I agree that it would be like tense, and that's why like the wild card is what it is. Like this, the one and done is because like there is so much riding on one inning, one plate appearance that you don't normally see. And, we saw it that one season where like everything came down to 162, and they increased the wild card just because like they want to manufacture that every season, that kind of tension. So yeah, I agree with you there. Like the theater would be something, but as somebody who leans towards trying to do your best to give the best team in baseball a chance to be the best team at the end of the season and not have it subjected to randomness. Like I would prefer to have like, more straight, more 7-game series, and fewer like small samples, throwing everything off. But I do like the idea of like the first round pick and maybe like do it in terms of like, play a series in Nashville, play it in Montreal, like host it in all these like potential expansion cities.
Oh, okay.
Do like a tour of like, to go back to like the Field of Dreams game and thinking about like, where can you place like interesting games in different settings that might turn out like a really special fan base or a scene. Like you could maybe do like, Hinchcliffe Stadium and in New Jersey is back, like the site of Negro Leagues games. They've rehabbed that. And like, what if you play the games there? Or what if you play the games just in, Nashville's AAA park or Portland? Just, kind of try to find these different places to play that maybe you can audition some potential expansion markets and get them excited and market the games there. Like, I like that idea. Like you said, like could be tough to get the players invested, but like, even if the players aren't invested, like maybe you can almost like a bowl game in a sense, like AAA players probably want to get in.
There you go.
And get some, extra paychecks and maybe play for a job next year. Like it can almost be like an expanded like September call-up situation into October, but like you could probably field competitive teams with something to prove with like some kind of postseason purse among those teams to reward the players for participating and the teams for actually having enough talent to win a series like that and not be complete like wastes like the Athletics.
Yeah. And if Oakland, with their roster, they don't, they get bounced, lose 2 straight games, and they don't get the number 1 pick.
Yeah.
You got to earn it.
You get the 6th overall or whatever it is. Like, and have the game start at 10 a.m.
Yeah, that would be
morning baseball during the postseason, like just like the undercard fight.
Perfect. Yes. So there we go. It's a crazy idea for the MLB playoffs to play at like a double elimination tournament. But Jim and I agree. The number 1 pick. Let us know what you guys think in the comment section at SoxMachine.com to decide how this should be the way that MLB gives out their top 6 picks in the MLB draft rather than the draft lottery. But if you didn't get a chance to watch the NCAA regionals, it's always a fun time. It's one of my favorite weekends of the calendar when it comes to baseball because it's so much baseball. Congrats to ESPN with Squeeze Play. That was their version of NFL Red Zone. Fantastic work, just bouncing between the 16 regionals. Our friend Mike Farron, he called the games down in Fayetteville in Arkansas. He did a fantastic job there. So there'll be more coming as far as the coverage this upcoming week of the 2023 MLB Draft Report. Who did well in the regionals coming from me, and I will also share with you my Dick Hauser voting. That's a Player of the Year award. I get to participate in that. I'll share my ballot with you guys and my All-American ballot as well on SoxMachine.com later this week. But Jim and I are going to take another quick break for a word from our sponsors. Let's talk about the White Sox next series against the New York Yankees. Welcome back to the Sox Machine podcast. All right, the Chicago White Sox move forward as they head on the road to face the New York Yankees at the Bronx. The Yankees had a good weekend in Los Angeles against the Dodgers. They won their last 2 games, Sunday and Saturday, as their win-loss record for the season is now 36-25. They're just 6 games back at Tampa. And that's a big thing in New York. They're starting to make up some ground on Tampa Bay. As the Yankees are playing some good baseball, they have won 6 of their last 10 games. Breaking down as far as what's working for the Yankees. So offensively, not firing on all cylinders quite yet. They have a team OPS of 727. That's good for 15th in Major League Baseball. From a Yankees perspective, that's a little disappointing. Pitching-wise, they have a staff ERA of 3.70. That's the 6th best in Major League Baseball. Now, the starters, a little bit of a struggle here. A 4.38 ERA for the starters. That's good for 14th in Major League Baseball. But the bullpen, a combined ERA of 2.89. It is the best bullpen in Major League Baseball. The pitching probables for this series, Tuesday night at 6:05 p.m. Central Time. It'll be Lucas Giolito against Clark Schmidt. This is going to be a Sox Machine from the 108 watch party on playback.tv/Sox Machine, so you guys will be able to watch this game along with us. Wednesday night, it's Lance Lynn for the White Sox against to be determined for the Yankees. And Thursday night, it's Mike Clevenger against Luis Severino. And Jim, the White Sox oftentimes struggle in the Bronx. They did play well in New York last year, where they had that doubleheader on Sunday. There was all that drama as well with Josh Donaldson and Tim Anderson. I'm not sure if that's going to be playing a factor in this upcoming series, but there was a lot going on the last time the White Sox visited the Bronx last year. And I feel like a lot of those storylines are subdued entering into this series. And this is a big test. Like, I know the White Sox players, every time that they have a big win at home, they, in the post-game conferences and speaking to beat reporters, still want to give the belief out there to everyone that follows this team, we're not out of this yet. We believe that we can win this division. I feel like this series against the Yankees is a good test just to check how much they actually believe in those words. Because if they can win this series, then maybe there's a chance the good vibes could continue into the middle part of this month before they head on that West Coast road trip to Los Angeles and Seattle. But this is going to be a tough series for the White Sox against a good Yankees team.
Yeah, it's on one hand, it's a tough series, but on the other hand, it's probably as approachable as the Yankees get with the pitchers they're rolling out. Like Clark Schmidt has moments, but he's hittable. Luis Severino has been good, but he's been, he had a late start to the season and he got rocked by the Dodgers his last time out. So he could be up and down or have some kind of dead arm period awaiting him as he starts like building up in earnest. And then their Wednesday pitching plans are up in the air because of Nestor Cortez, all-star last year, having shoulder problems this year, really off his game. So they have to improvise there. So in terms of like who they're missing, like not seeing Garrett Cole at all, like that's a plus. So like this is a way to get in to a series against the Yankees. If there's any way to get into a series against the Yankees with the offense the White Sox have been rolling out there. So if they don't, it's a case where it's like 3 games, small sample. If they win 1 out of 3, that'll be disappointing. That'll make you think like, oh, the Yankees, the White Sox can't hang with good teams. But, we talked about it before, like usually in the context of like them playing the Astros or the Rays, like, did they get their doors blown off or did they look like a real team that just, was one bad break away from winning the series? And when you look at 3 games in isolation, like there's a difference between the two. And then it just becomes a matter of like, how do they bounce back from that? Do they win the next series? Then you can brush it off. If it happens to be a string of winning 1 out of 3 because they can't make the breaks go their way, then that reveals a talent shortage. So they did do what they had to do against the Tigers, which is like beat them by any means necessary. And a fastball to the forehead of the home plate ump to win the game is by any means necessary, I think. Next step is now increasing the degree of difficulty and facing a Yankees team that's good. Like Aaron Judge is back to MVP form, and he's one of those players who can mask deficiencies elsewhere on the roster. Like he seems like he can cover 2 or 3 roster spots by himself when he's hitting like he's hitting right now. And so like that's a case where the White Sox do have to contend with some landmines in this lineup of just can make an inning explode at any point if you step on it. But when it comes to the other spots in the Yankees lineup, there should be some easy innings. There should be some relief situations that don't feel like do or die based on like, are you facing 2, 3, 4 or 7, 8, 9? And then with the starters they're rolling out, all gettable if the White Sox are on one of their good streaks. If Luis Robert has his plate discipline or whatever constitutes his plate discipline calibrated. If you're getting some BABIP luck, like there are some ways for the White Sox to win the series, but it does make them have to win it. Whereas with the Tigers just lose series. The Tigers don't have enough to win series by themselves with regularity with Riley Green out and with Eduardo Rodriguez out. So now it's a case where the White Sox do have to win rather than not lose. And it will be a good test. And like I said, like after the 3 games, we'll see like how well they played. But if it's another series where they only scored, 7 runs over 3 games and lost every game 6-2 because just, it became a matter of low leverage guys getting reps and Garrett Crochet giving up 2 garbage time runs that, blew up the score. Then you're kind of back to where they were before the Detroit series where, how good are they? If the Angels beat them, and the Angels aren't that good and the Yankees are actually better than the Angels, you're kind of seeing how the rest of this month could go.
Yeah, Aaron Judge on the season has 19 home runs. He's got 40 RBIs. His OPS for the season is over 1,000 on the year. So to Jim's point, yes, he's playing at his MVP level once again. And looking at the last 15 days to see who else is hot. So in the last 15 days, Aaron Judge has 6 home runs, 10 walks, and 13 strikeouts. Harrison Bader's got 3 homers. Jake Bauers, not sure where he came from for the Yankees, but he's got 3 homers in his last 11 games. Gleyber Torres also has 3 home runs. And I mentioned Josh Donaldson earlier. He has played 2 games in the last 15 days for the Yankees, and he does have 2 home runs for the Yankees. He's currently 2 for 8 in his last 15. So, again, it is a lot of Aaron Judge. And speaking of Aaron Judge, he's going to be the focus point here. How should the White Sox go after Judge? Would you be fine if they just pitched around him all series and forced the other hitters to beat them? Or do you want the White Sox pitching staff to attack Aaron Judge?
I think it depends on the score. I think he is one of those hitters who, maybe not quite peak Barry Bonds, but when he's on one of these tears, it might be as close to Barry Bonds as he gets in terms of just not feeling like any one pitch gets past him. Just, he has that kind of gargantuan plate coverage and, a combination of his plate coverage, his power to all fields, and Yankee Stadium rewarding any kind of decently hit ball to right field in the air. It's a perfect combination for him of just even his shanks go out to right field at Yankee Stadium when he's lining up the ball well enough to be close to on time. That's how strong he is to where he can just muscle balls into the third row into the seats out there. So that's what makes him difficult to face in Yankee Stadium. And I think that's why it becomes more of a concern to pitch to him versus say, Mike Trout, who doesn't quite have that power to get lucky with one swing like that. Or even Shohei Ohtani, not quite on that plane of just Aaron Judge with the short porch in right field at Yankee Stadium. So yeah, I think there is the tendency to want to pitch around him, especially if the White Sox are playing a lot of high leverage games or 1-run games with their offense not being able to really create multi-run leads. Especially early in games where you feel like you have time to get that deficit back. There might not be a lot of situations where you feel like you can make a mistake to Aaron Judge and be okay with it. So if this inspires the White Sox to build 3-run leads early in the games, then great. But if they're playing tense affairs, then I wonder if you will see more pitch arounds, intentional walks, because the White Sox, with the guys they roll out there, do have the tendency to give up homers. They can have bad innings, and it is a bad combination, especially, like I said, factoring in the ballpark. We've seen guaranteed rate field used against the White Sox, and Yankee Stadium is just a more severe version of guaranteed rate field in terms of just unimpressive contact to right field, playing a larger role in games than you might think.
Yeah, you don't want to walk the batters ahead of Aaron Judge. You don't want to give free passes and you have no choice but to face Aaron Judge. I mean, in his last 5 games, he's got 4 home runs. So he's red hot right now. So obviously that's going to be a big matchup for the White Sox to pay attention to and how they handle Aaron Judge. Jim, what else are you going to be paying attention to in this series of the Bronx?
Well, when Anthony Rizzo always plays the White Sox, I always just wonder, how many times is he going to get plunked? Just because that tends to happen. Not a betting man, but I would bet on that outcome if that is a outcome you can bet on, just because it seems like it'll happen. So always look out for him. Jake Bauers, you mentioned him, like he seems to be the random Yankee success story that they always have to prop up offenses that are weak in name brand talent. Like they get like Mike Tauchman and Mike Ford and just all these guys, from the scrap heap from other teams, they dust them off. Clint Frazier was one of them briefly. And then, he had the concussion issues that limited his run, but they always have these bursts from random players that, it's a testament, I think, to the Yankees' talent identification and just being able to mold some swings, at least to buy them a year. And then maybe like the adjustments come in and they can't quite replicate that talent, but they're always great at buying time. Like the White Sox have never been able to do that the way the Yankees can. I think that's one of the things that separates the two teams in terms of just the Yankees being able to avoid those really, really dead spots in the lineup, that submarine White Sox season. So I'm interested to see him because we've seen Jake Bauers look bad in Cleveland and Tampa Bay, and I want to see what makes him different now.
Me too. It'd be really interesting to see if Jake Bauers could still do some damage against the White Sox pitchers. But again, if the White Sox can navigate Aaron Judge, the rest of the Yankees lineup has been pretty cold. And that's why when you look at their team OPS, ranked 15th in Major League Baseball, I feel like Aaron Judge has carried a lot of weight for the Yankees offense. So that would be a focal point of this series. Can the White Sox minimize the damage that Aaron Judge does against them? If they can, they got a chance here of pulling off the upset, winning a series in New York, and that would definitely bring good vibes as the White Sox would come home after the series against the Yankees to facing the Miami Marlins next weekend at home.
Oh, I also forgot that Andrew Benintendi. I predicted a homer this series, and so I feel like my pride is on the line here.
All right, here we go. Maybe he and Tim Anderson can hit home runs.
Yeah, because Anderson might be booed.
He probably will be booed. That's a good point. I forgot about that.
Yeah, we'll see if that carries over. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a storyline, but we'll see how long memories are because, Donaldson hasn't really played much. He did hit 2 homers. He's been back for a couple games, but he's been his usual disappointing self in terms of just not being available. So I don't know if Yankees fans are on his side yet to care enough about Tim Anderson this far removed from the incident, but we'll see. I'm interested to see how he's received. I imagine if Anderson does something, then he might be booed because they might remember oh yeah, we don't like this guy. But it might be a case where they just if he's not doing anything, don't bother him. And, maybe we'll all get by okay.
Maybe. We'll see. Maybe Donaldson will have something to say to Anderson when he gets to third base or to second base in this series. Yeah. Hopefully not. That was a bit silly last year. With the way that Donaldson handled that particular situation. But again, we'll be recapping each of these games during the White Sox wake-up call, and we will have the watch party as well on playback.tv/Sox Machine. That's going to start at 6 p.m. Central Time on Tuesday, so again, you guys can watch the White Sox-Yankees game along with us. But that will do it for this episode of the Sox Machine podcast. Thank you guys so much for listening. If you just discovered the Sox Machine podcast, you can subscribe to the show wherever you listen to podcasts, such as Spotify and Apple Music. We also upload our podcast episodes into our YouTube channel, which you can watch those at youtube.com/Sox Machine. If you do watch our videos on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Sox Machine. I'm at SoxMachine_Josh. Those are also our Instagram handles as well. If you enjoy our work and you want more, you can get more by signing up at patreon.com/Sox Machine, where our Patreon supporters get exclusive content, ad-free versions of both the podcast and website, and when we have new Sox Machine swag in the Sox Machine store, they're the first ones to receive it. Monthly plans start at $2, or you can save with an annual subscription. Again, sign up at patreon.com/Sox Machine. The Sox Machine podcast is a production of SoxMachine.com, your home for all things Chicago White Sox baseball, and part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network. Alongside Jim Margulis, I'm Josh Nelson. Thanks for listening and watching.